The chamber was enormous, larger than any cathedral on Earth. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the center, surrounded by beings from hundreds of worlds. Some floated in containment fields. Others towered on multiple legs. A few existed as pure energy, their thoughts translated into words by ancient machines. This was the Galactic Council, and they were about to tell her no. Sarah had practiced her speech for weeks. She showed them Earth's military data, their tactical simulations, their offers to help. The holographic displays floated around her, showing humanity's capabilities. It wasn't much compared to the Council's technology, but it was something. And right now, the galaxy needed everything it could get. The Void Swarm had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of known space. At first, the Council thought it was just another migration of space fauna. They were wrong. The swarm consumed everything in its path. Planets, stations, entire colonies vanished into its mass. It didn't use ships or weapons that anyone could understand. It simply ate and grew and moved forward. 3 star systems had already gone dark. The Council's outer defense fleets had engaged the swarm twice. Both times, they barely escaped. The recordings Sarah had seen were terrifying. The swarm moved like a living thing, adapting to every attack, learning from every encounter. It was getting smarter, and it was getting closer to the core worlds. That's why Sarah was here. Earth wanted to help. Humanity had only been in space for a few centuries, but they knew how to fight. Their whole history was written in wars and conflicts. Surely that experience could be useful now. High Arbiter Velthuan raised one of his 3 primary appendages. The chamber fell silent. His species, the Krasith, had been exploring the galaxy for 47,000 years. They were one of the eldest races, respected and wise. When Velthuan spoke, everyone listened. Ambassador Chun. His voice resonated through the translator systems. We appreciate Earth's enthusiasm. However, this crisis requires experienced hands. Your species achieved space travel only 500 years ago. You are still learning the basics of galactic civilization. Sarah felt her stomach sink, but she kept her face neutral. With respect, High Arbiter, humanity has extensive experience with warfare. Our strategic databases contain thousands of years of tactical knowledge. We understand conflict in ways that is precisely the problem. Another council member interrupted. This one was Jarek, a crystalline being from the Luminous Collective. Her facets reflected light across the chamber as she spoke. Your world is still classified as a danger zone. Your species fights among themselves constantly. You have barely achieved planetary unity. This is not the expertise we need. Other council members murmured in agreement. Sarah looked around the chamber, seeing it in their faces, their energy patterns, their body language, whatever passed for it among their species. They thought Earth was too young, too violent, too primitive. We have protocols for this situation, Velthuan continued. The combined armada is being assembled as we speak. 6,000 vessels from 200 civilized worlds. We have quantum-synchronized battle networks that can coordinate millions of tactical decisions per second. We have shields that can withstand stellar radiation and weapons that can crack moons. We do not need your help, Ambassador Chan. We need you to stay safe while we handle this threat. The words were polite, but Sarah heard the real message. Go home, children. Let the adults handle this. She wanted to argue more. She wanted to tell them that maybe their advanced technology wasn't the answer to every problem. But she could see it was pointless. The council had made their decision. I understand, Sarah said quietly. Earth will respect the council's wishes. But if you change your minds, we'll be ready. That won't be necessary, Velthuan said, with what might have been kindness in his tone. Return to Earth, Ambassador. Assure your people that they are safe. The Council protects all member worlds, even provisional ones like yours. The session ended. Sarah walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast corridors of Centralis Prime. Her security detail fell in around her, but nobody spoke. What was there to say? The shuttle ride back to Earth's diplomatic vessel was quiet. Sarah stared out the window at the massive space station that housed the Council. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked at its ports. Some were elegant, flowing designs that looked like art. Others were geometric, all hard angles and purpose. Earth ships looked blocky and crude by comparison, but they worked. The jump back to Earth took 3 days. Sarah spent most of it writing her report. She knew what would happen when she delivered it. The United Earth Defense Council would be angry. Admiral Morrison would probably punch something. But orders were orders, and Earth was bound by the treaties they'd signed when they joined the Galactic Council. When she finally stood before the UEDC in their underground command center in Geneva, she delivered the news simply. They said no. They think we're too young and too violent to help. Admiral Morrison, a scarred veteran of the Mars Rebellion, leaned back in his chair. He was a big man with gray hair and cold eyes that had seen too much combat. Too violent, he repeated. They realize there's a planet-eating swarm heading their way, right? They're confident in their technology, Sarah said. 6,000 ships, quantum battle networks, weapons we can't even understand. And when was the last time most of those species actually fought a real war? Morrison asked. Not a border skirmish or a pirate raid. A real war. Sarah checked her notes. The Krizith haven't had a major conflict in 12,000 years. The Luminous Collective's last war was 8,000 years ago. Most council species have been at peace for millennia. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. Peace was wonderful, but it made you soft. It made you forget how to truly fight. General Okoro from the African Union spoke up. What do we do? Morrison stood and walked to the holographic display showing the galaxy. The void swarm's projected path glowed in red, cutting through the outer systems toward the core worlds. Toward Earth. We prepare anyway, Morrison said. Quietly. Move the fleets to the Jupiter staging grounds. Full combat readiness. If the Council won't let us help, fine. But when their perfect plan fails, and I think it will, we'll be ready to do what needs to be done. That could be seen as insubordination, another general warned. We're bound by treaty. We're bound to defend humanity, Morrison corrected. And something tells me the Council is going to need us, whether they want to admit it or not. Sarah looked at the display, watching the red line inch closer to populated space. Morrison was right. The Council had experience and technology, but did they remember how to fight for survival? How to adapt when perfect plans failed? How to keep going when everything seemed hopeless? Those were things humanity knew too well. Get the fleets ready, Sarah agreed. Quietly. And let's hope I'm wrong about what's coming. But deep down, she knew she wasn't wrong. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson, and Earth would be there when it did. The Battle of Cartnus lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 40% of the Council's armada was gone. Not damaged. Not retreating. Simply gone. Consumed by the void swarm like they had never existed. Sarah watched the recordings in the UEDC command center. The footage came from surviving ships, transmitted through quantum relays. It should have been an easy victory. 6,000 ships against a biological mass that didn't even use conventional technology. The Council had better weapons, better shields, better everything, but better didn't matter. The Armada had arranged itself in perfect formation. Their quantum battle network linking every ship into a single coordinated mind. They fired in synchronized waves, each blast calculated to maximize damage. Their shields overlapped, creating a defensive wall that should have been impenetrable. The swarm simply adapted. The first wave of attacks hurted. The recordings showed massive chunks of the swarm breaking apart, drifting into space. The council commanders celebrated. They thought they were winning. Then the swarm changed. Its mass rippled and reformed, spreading out instead of clumping together. When the second wave hit, the damage was less. The third wave even less. By the fourth wave, the swarm had figured out how to absorb the energy from the council's weapons, using it to grow faster. "They're too predictable," Morrison muttered, watching the footage. "Look at that formation. It's perfect. Mathematically perfect." And that's the problem. Sarah saw it too. The council's battle network made every ship act as one, following optimal calculations. It was efficient and coordinated and completely without variation. The swarm learned the pattern in under an hour. Once it knew what to expect, it countered every move. The breakthrough came when the swarm started targeting the network nodes themselves. The ships at the center of each formation cluster, the ones coordinating all the others. When those went down, entire sections of the armada lost coordination. Ships that were used to perfect synchronization suddenly had to act independently. Most of them didn't know how. The retreat was chaotic. Ships broke formation and ran in all directions. The swarm pursued, picking off stragglers. Only the fastest vessels made it to the jump points. The council reconvened in emergency session 3 days later. Sarah wasn't invited this time, but Earth's intelligence network had sources everywhere. They heard every word. The meeting was nothing like the calm, dignified assembly from before. Council members shouted at each other. Some blamed the military commanders for incompetence. Others accused different species of holding back their best ships. A few suggested that certain races had secretly made deals with the swarm. Velthuin tried to maintain order, but even he seemed shaken. His species had never lost a fleet battle in recorded history. Now they had lost 40% of their forces in 6 hours. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, Earth's lead xenobiologist, analyzed the battle data constantly. He barely slept, spending every moment studying the swarm's behavior. After 4 days, he called a meeting with Morrison and the UEDC leadership. "It's not an invasion force," Kenji explained, projecting holographic models of the swarm. "It's a superorganism. Think of it like a wolf pack, but the wolves are all one creature. It doesn't strategize like we do. It hunts. What's the difference?" General Okoro asked. "Strategy requires planning ahead, predicting outcomes, choosing between options," Kenji said. "The swarm doesn't do any of that. It reacts to stimuli in real time. It's pure adaptation, pure evolution compressed into hours instead of generations. The council is trying to outsmart it, but you can't outsmart a predator. You can only outfight it." Morrison leaned forward. "And humanity knows how to fight predators. We spent thousands of years as both predator and prey." Kenji nodded. "Every human culture has stories about hunting monsters, about being hunted. We understand this threat on an instinctive level. The council species evolved past that. They forgot." Sarah looked at the models, seeing the swarm's movement patterns. Kenji was right. It moved like a living thing, like every predator Earth had ever produced. It tested defenses, looking for weakness. It feinted and flanked. It saved energy by going after easy targets first. "The council is planning another battle," Sarah said quietly. "At the Helios Gate, they're going to funnel the swarm through a choke point and destroy the gate behind it." "That won't work," Kenji said immediately. "The swarm doesn't funnel. It's not following roads or obeying traffic laws. It'll just go around through the nebula regions. Those regions are sensor dead zones," Morrison said thoughtfully. "Nothing can navigate through them reliably. The council considers them impassable." "For their ships, maybe," Kenji replied. But the swarm doesn't need sensors. It probably tracks prey by some kind of biological sense we don't even understand. Those nebulas won't slow it down at all. The room fell silent as everyone understood. The Council's plan would fail. They would abandon the Helios Gate, fall back to defensive positions, and watch as the swarm came at them from unexpected angles. Millions, maybe billions, would die. "We have to tell them," Sarah said. "They won't listen," Morrison countered. "We're too young, too violent, remember? Why would they take advice from us?" "Because they're desperate," Sarah said. "And desperate people listen to anyone with an idea." She was wrong. The Council refused her requests for an audience. They were too busy preparing for the Helios Gate defense. Earth's warnings were filed away as well-meaning but inexperienced opinions. Morrison made a decision. He called in Captain Maria Santos, commander of the UESS Defiant, one of Earth's fastest destroyers. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for bending rules when necessary. "I need you to have an accident," Morrison told her. Santos raised an eyebrow. "What kind of accident, sir?" "The kind where you're doing evacuation runs near the Tartarus Nebula and accidentally stumble into swarm scouts. Then you run into the nebula, make them chase you, and gather data on how they behave in sensor-dead conditions." "That's not an accident, sir. That's suicide." "It's a calculated risk," Morrison corrected. "The Defiant is fast. You get in, prove the swarm can operate in nebulas, transmit the data, and get out. If we're right, it proves our theory. If we're wrong, we die proving ourselves wrong," Santos finished. "When do we leave?" 4 days. The Council makes their stand at the Helios Gate in 10 days. We need to prove our point before then. Sarah wanted to object, but she knew Morrison was right. Words wouldn't convince the Council. Only evidence would. And if Santos failed, if the Defiant was lost, it would just prove that humans were as reckless and primitive as the Council believed. 4 days later, the Defiant launched. Sarah watched from Earth's command center as the ship made its way toward the outer colonies. On paper, Santos was evacuating refugees from a station in the danger zone. In reality, she was heading straight for swarm-controlled space. The wait was agonizing. For 2 days, there was only silence. Then Santos transmitted the code phrase, "Contact made." The Defiant had found swarm scouts on the edge of the Tartarus Nebula. Santos did exactly what Morrison ordered. She fired on the scouts, damaged but didn't destroy them, then ran straight into the nebula's densest regions. The swarm followed. For 6 hours, Santos broadcast data as the Defiant ran through the nebula. The swarm pursued her through conditions that would blind any Council ship. It didn't slow down. It didn't hesitate. It tracked her through sensor-dead space like it could smell blood in water. Kenji was right. The swarm was a predator, and it could hunt anywhere. The Defiant escaped by the narrowest margin, jumping out of the nebula just as the swarm closed in. Santos transmitted her full data package directly to the Council's military command. This time, they had to listen. Within hours, Sarah received a message. High Arbiter Velthuin requested her immediate presence at Centralis Prime. Not requested, required. This wasn't a polite diplomatic meeting. This was an emergency. When Sarah arrived at the Council chamber, the atmosphere was completely different. The calm dignity was gone. These beings were afraid. Velthuin spoke without preamble. "Your captain's data confirms our worst projections. The swarm can operate in the nebula regions. Our Helios Gate strategy will fail." He paused, and Sarah saw something she never expected in the ancient alien's bearing. Humility. "We need Earth's help." "What do you propose?" Sarah stood before the Galactic Council once again, but this time, every eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on her with desperate attention. She opened the tactical display, showing the Tartarus Nebula in 3 dimensions. "The swarm is a predator," she began. "It doesn't think like you do. It doesn't plan campaigns or calculate logistics. It hunts, and predators have weaknesses. They follow wounded prey. They cluster when feeding. They can be baited." Velthuin leaned forward. "You want to use the nebula as a trap?" "Yes. Small ships go in first, broadcasting distress signals. The swarm has learned to hunt those signals. It will follow. Once it's deep in the nebula, spread out chasing multiple targets, we hit it with everything we have." "But the nebula blocks sensors," Jarek protested. "Our battle networks cannot function there. How do we coordinate?" Morrison's voice came through the comlink, joining the meeting from Earth. "You don't coordinate. Not the way you're used to. Individual captains make their own decisions, adapt in real time, communicate when possible, but fight independently when they can't. It's called chaos warfare, and it's what humans are good at." The council chamber erupted in alarmed murmurs. The idea of ships acting without central coordination was terrifying to species that had relied on perfect synchronization for millennia. "This is madness," one council member declared. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But madness is what the swarm doesn't expect. Your perfect coordination made you predictable. Chaos makes us unpredictable." Velthuin was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "What do you need?" "Control of the operation. Full authority to position ships and give orders. And I need captains who can think for themselves when communications fail. You're asking us to put our fleets under human command. I'm asking you to let us teach your captains how to fight. Without a safety net," Sarah corrected. "We have 4 days before the swarm reaches this position. Some of your people won't learn in time, but some will." The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, fear won over pride. The council agreed. Admiral Morrison was given tactical command. Captains from dozens of species volunteered to follow the human plan, though many more refused, calling it barbaric and reckless. The fleet gathered at the edge of the Tartarus Nebula. It wasn't 6,000 ships anymore. The Cartoonist battle had reduced the Council's forces by nearly half. But they had 2,000 vessels, and about 300 captains willing to try the human way. Morrison addressed them all from the bridge of the USS Armstrong, his flagship. "You've spent your lives following perfect plans. Your networks told you where to go, when to fire, how to move. Today, you fight alone. You make your own choices. You trust your instincts. Some of you will make mistakes. Some of you will die. But together, fighting as individuals, we have a chance." Captain Santos volunteered to lead the bait ships. The Defiant would go deepest into the nebula, drawing the swarm inward. 15 other fast ships joined her, a mix of human and alien vessels. Their captains were all veterans, people who had fought pirates and raiders and knew how to improvise. The plan was simple but dangerous. The bait ships would enter the nebula broadcasting damage codes and distress signals. They would split up, each heading in different directions, forcing the swarm to spread out to chase them. Meanwhile, Morrison had seeded the nebula with thousands of automated weapons platforms. Simple devices that didn't need sophisticated sensors. They used heat tracking and motion detection, crude but effective. The main fleet would wait at the nebula's edge. When the swarm was deep enough, stretched thin chasing multiple targets, they would strike. The operation began at dawn, measured by Centralist Prime's rotation. Santos took the Defiant into the nebula first, her ship's engines burning hot to create an obvious heat signature. Within minutes, swarm scouts detected her and gave chase. "Contact confirmed," Santos transmitted. "They're following." Moving to Waypoint Alpha. One by one, the other bait ships entered the nebula, each broadcasting distress and each drawing portions of the swarm after them. It worked. The swarm, acting on predatory instinct, couldn't resist the wounded prey. Its mass began to spread, fragments chasing different targets into the sensor-dead clouds. Morrison watched the displays from the Armstrong. He couldn't see the bait ships anymore. The nebula blocked everything. He could only wait and trust that his people were doing their jobs. Inside the nebula, Santos flew the Defiant through stellar gas so thick it looked like fog. Her sensors were useless. She navigated by instinct and the crude beacon signals from Morrison's weapons platforms. Behind her, the swarm followed, its mass rippling through the clouds. "They're gaining," her tactical officer reported, tracking the heat signatures. "Let them," Santos said calmly. She was leading them exactly where Morrison wanted them. Deeper, spread out, vulnerable. The other bait ships did the same, each captain making their own decisions about speed and direction. Some of the alien captains panicked at first, uncomfortable with the lack of coordination. But they learned quickly. In the nebula, with no network to guide them, they had to trust themselves. 2 of the bait ships didn't make it. One pushed too deep and got caught. Another's engine failed at the worst possible moment. Santos heard their final transmissions and kept flying. This was war. People died. That was the reality humanity had never forgotten. 3 hours into the operation, Morrison received confirmation from all remaining bait ships. The swarm was spread across 200 cubic light-years of dense nebula, its coherence broken, its mass fragmented. "All ships," Morrison transmitted. "Execute." The weapons platforms activated simultaneously. Thousands of automated guns opened fire, creating a web of destruction throughout the nebula. The platforms couldn't see their targets well, but they didn't need to. The swarm was everywhere, and the platforms just fired into the clouds, saturating the space with energy and kinetic rounds. The swarm began to cluster, trying to reform its mass. That's when the main fleet struck. 2,000 ships entered the nebula from different angles, attacking without coordination, each captain choosing their own targets and tactics. It was chaos. Ships crossed paths, nearly collided, fired at angles that would make any tactical II scream in protest. But it worked. The swarm couldn't predict what was coming because there was no pattern to predict. Each ship fought differently. Human vessels used aggressive close-range attacks. Some alien ships used hit-and-run tactics. Others set up ambush positions and waited for the swarm to come to them. Santos brought the Defiant around for a second pass, firing everything she had into a cluster of swarm biomass. Her ship shook from the recoil. Beside her, a Krasith cruiser executed a maneuver its captain had clearly invented in the moment, using the nebula's density to hide before striking. "This is insane," the Krasith captain transmitted. "Yes," Santos agreed, grinning despite the danger. "Isn't it wonderful?" The battle raged for 6 hours. Ships were lost. Good people died. But slowly and possibly, the swarm began to weaken. Its adaptation ability required coherence, required learning from experience and sharing that knowledge across its mass. Scattered and confused, it couldn't learn fast enough. Morrison watched the casualty reports climb. 70 ships gone. 100. 200. Each one represented hundreds or thousands of lives. But the swarm was dying faster. Then came the critical moment. Morrison had saved one final piece of the trap. The Armstrong and 50 heavy human warships had hung back, waiting. Now they moved to the center of the nebula, to the densest concentration of swarm biomass. "All ships, fall back to safe distance," Morrison ordered. "Armstrong is going to core position." Sarah, listening from Centralist Prime, felt her blood run cold. "James, what are you doing?" "What needs to be done?" Morrison replied simply. The Armstrong carried something the Council had considered primitive and unnecessary: nuclear weapons. Not elegant antimatter or exotic quantum devices. Simple fusion and fission bombs, thousands of them, scaled up to massive sizes. Against a biological enemy that used density for strength, they were perfect. Morrison's ship pushed into the thickest part of the swarm. Around him, the other heavy warships did the same, forming a sphere. Each ship was loaded with the same payload. Initiating countdown, Morrison announced. 2 minutes. All personnel, it's been an honor. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, we could set these on remote detonation. We could escape. The swarm would adapt and deflect them, Morrison replied. We need to be at point-blank range. This is the only way to be sure. Santos heard the transmission and understood what was happening. Admiral, belay that order. The Defiant can. Captain Santos, you have your orders. Fall back. That's final. Across the fleet, captains from dozens of species listened in silence. Some had argued that humans were too violent, too willing to die. Now they understood. Humanity didn't love death. They just understood that some things were worth dying for. The countdown reached 0. 50 ships detonated their entire payload simultaneously. The explosion tore through the nebula like a new star being born. The chain reaction, amplified by the hydrogen-rich environment, expanded in a sphere of absolute destruction. When the light faded, the swarm was gone. Not scattered, not wounded, destroyed at a molecular level. The nebula burned for 3 days afterward, the fire sustained by the gases Morrison had used against the enemy. When it finally cleared, search teams found no trace of the Armstrong or any of the 50 ships. 4,000 people had died in an instant. But the galaxy survived. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood before a holographic memorial that displayed the Armstrong and the names of all 4,000 crew members who had died with Admiral Morrison. The list scrolled slowly, each name a life given for the galaxy's survival. High Arbiter Velthuan approached the memorial. For a being that had lived for 3,000 years and led the council for 800, he moved with unusual hesitation. When he finally spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with absolute clarity. We called your species juvenile, he said. We called you barbaric, violent, unready for the responsibilities of galactic civilization. We were correct in our observations, but we were profoundly wrong in our conclusions. He turned to face the assembled council members. Humanity carries scars from 5,000 years of fighting for survival on a hostile world. They evolved in competition, in conflict, in constant struggle. We forgot what such an existence teaches. We forgot because we have been comfortable for so long that we lost the ability to make the hard choices. Volthuan's gaze returned to the memorial. Admiral Morrison had a choice. He could have fled. He could have let others make the sacrifice. But he understood something we had forgotten, that sometimes survival requires more than intelligence or technology. It requires the will to pay the price. Another council member, a luminous representative named Kethril, spoke up. But at what cost? 4,000 lives in a single moment. How can we celebrate such violence? We do not celebrate it, Velthuan replied. We honor it. There's a difference. Those 4,000 chose to die so that billions could live. That is not violence for its own sake. That is sacrifice. Sarah listened, her emotions carefully controlled. She had cried already, in private. Now was the time for strength. Morrison would have expected nothing less. The motion before the council is clear, Velthuan continued. Earth's status as a provisional member is hereby ended. Effective immediately, humanity is granted full council membership with all rights and responsibilities. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in the council's 12,000-year history, a species had moved from provisional to full member in less than 3 centuries. It usually took 5,000 years, but Velthuin wasn't finished. Furthermore, Earth is granted a seat on the Security Directorate. They will serve as military advisors to all Council forces. And I propose a new mandate. Every Council species must send military officers to train with human forces. Not to learn specific tactics, but to learn the mindset. The willingness to adapt, to improvise, to make hard choices under pressure. That proposal caused murmurs throughout the chamber. Some council members looked uncomfortable. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked almost eager. Jarek of the Luminous Collective stood. High Arbiter, are you suggesting we become more like humans? More violent? I am suggesting we remember what our ancestors knew, Velthuin replied. Before we had quantum networks and perfect coordination, our species also fought for survival. We were once capable of the same determination, the same adaptability. We did not lose those capabilities because they were bad. We lost them because we no longer needed them. But the universe has reminded us that safety is never permanent. Sarah found herself called to speak. She approached the center of the chamber, aware that this moment would define Earth's relationship with the galaxy for generations. The Council honors us today, she began. But I want to be clear about what we are and what we are not. Humanity is not inherently better at war because we're violent. We're better at it because we never had the luxury of forgetting. Earth has no global shield. No perfect peace for thousands of years. We fight among ourselves, yes. We argue and compete, and sometimes worse. But that constant friction kept us sharp. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Admiral Morrison once told me that the difference between war and slaughter is adaptation. The swarm was winning because it could adapt, and you could not. Not because you were weak, but because your strength had become rigid. Morrison died teaching the galaxy how to bend instead of break. And what does Earth want in return for this lesson? Cathrall asked, suspicion in her crystalline voice. We want you to listen when we speak, Sarah replied bluntly. Never again dismiss us because we're young, or because our methods seem crude. Age is not the same as wisdom. Technology is not the same as effectiveness. And most importantly, we want the authority to prevent the next crisis before it becomes catastrophic. You want military power, Cathrall said. We want the ability to protect the galaxy, Sarah corrected. There will be other threats. Maybe not like the swarm, maybe worse. When that time comes, we need to be ready. All of us. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The swarm had changed everything. The Council could no longer pretend that perfect peace and advanced technology guaranteed safety. 3 weeks later, the first class of alien officers arrived on Earth for military training. They came from 20 different species, each one handpicked by their governments. Some came eagerly, wanting to learn. Others came reluctantly, seeing it as necessary but distasteful. General Okoro met them at the training facility in Kenya. She was blunt with them from the start. You will hate this training. It will seem chaotic, inefficient, and brutal. You will question why we do things certain ways. That's fine. Questions are good. But you will follow orders, and you will complete the course. The training was indeed brutal. The alien officers learned to fight without AI assistance, to navigate without quantum networks, to make decisions with incomplete information. They learned human military history, studying battles from ancient times to the modern era. They learned about failures as much as victories. A Kraseth officer named Thelmer struggled the most. His species had used battle networks for so long that individual decision-making felt paralyzing. During a simulation, he froze when communications were cut, unable to act without guidance. Captain Santos, now promoted to instructor, pulled him aside afterward. What happened out there? I did not know what to do, Thelmer admitted. his shame evident. Without the network, without coordination, I could not calculate the optimal response. That's your problem, Santos said. You're trying to calculate. War isn't math. It's chaos with objectives. You don't need the optimal response. You need a response that's good enough, right now. But what if I choose wrong? Then you adapt and choose again. Humans make wrong choices all the time. The trick is failing fast, learning fast, and trying something new. Perfection gets you killed because you spend too much time thinking. Thelmer eventually passed the course. So did most of the others. They returned to their species changed, carrying with them new ways of thinking about conflict and crisis. 50 years passed. The Galactic Military Academy on Centralis Prime now had a permanent human warfare wing. Every officer candidate, regardless of species, spent at least 1 year studying human tactical doctrine. On the walls hung portraits of famous human military thinkers alongside alien strategists. The Morrison Protocol became standard training, learning to fight without central coordination, to adapt in real time, to accept calculated risks. Some species took to it naturally. Others struggled but persevered. All recognized its necessity. The memorial to the Armstrong stood in the Academy's main courtyard. A piece of actual hull plating from the ship, recovered from the nebula, was mounted on a stone base. The metal was scarred and burned, a testament to what it had endured. The inscription beneath read simply, "They were the galaxy's last hope." They chose to be enough. Students from hundreds of worlds passed the memorial every day. Some stopped to read the names. Others simply paid their respects and moved on. But all of them understood the lesson. Sarah Chun, now retired and living quietly on Earth, received a message from Centralis Prime. It was from Thelmer, the Krasith officer who had once frozen in a simulation. He had risen to become commander of his species' defense forces. Ambassador Chun, the message read, "I wanted you to know that today we faced a crisis. A rebel faction tried to seize control of our primary shipyards. 60 years ago, we would have tried to negotiate, to calculate optimal responses, to coordinate through networks. But I remembered Captain Santos and the Morrison Protocol. We adapted. We improvised. We stopped the crisis before it became catastrophic. No council species was lost. I thought Admiral Morrison would have approved." Sarah smiled as she read it. James would have indeed approved. Not because violence had won the day, but because beings who once relied solely on perfect coordination had learned to think for themselves. The galaxy was safer now. Not because humanity had made everyone more violent, but because humanity had reminded everyone what their ancestors knew, that survival requires adaptability, that peace must be earned and defended, and that sometimes the only way forward is through sacrifice. Earth was no longer the young, violent species on the fringes of civilization. They were full partners, respected and valued. But more than that, they were teachers, passing on the hard lessons of their bloody history so that others might avoid those same mistakes. In the end, humanity had saved the galaxy, not by being stronger or smarter, but by remembering what it meant to fight for existence. They've been the galaxy's last hope, because when the moment came, they were the only ones who still knew how to stare into the abyss and say, "Not today." And the galaxy had learned to say it with them.